Hello, welcome wherever you are in the world. Now, I must highlight before we begin that I believe we are spanning several different time zones today, and almost by the very fact that we are tuning into this webinar, it's a great example of a work from anywhere future. But today we are going to be focusing specifically on the APAC region and what trends are happening as a result of remote working. Now, this webinar is kindly sponsored by AltoVita, and we will be hearing from the company's CEO later on. But for now, we're going to play a short video by way of introduction to AltoVita. A few webinar guidelines before we jump in. Everyone who is tuning in live will be automatically muted with your cameras turned off, and it's not because we don't want to see your delightful faces, it's simply so that we have zero interruptions during our conversation today. And we're going to spend around 45 minutes in discussion with our panel, followed by a Q&A from the audience. So please, if you have any questions for any of our speakers, submit these using the Q&A function, and I will get round to these at the end. And the session is being recorded, so every single registrant will receive a copy of the recording within a couple of days. And today we also have some polls, and I would really appreciate it if you'd spend some time answering these polls, and I will reveal the results right at the end of our webinar today. So before we jump on it, I am going to provide some context to the conversation, and what I'm aiming to do here is highlight what's happening elsewhere in the world so that we can then hone in on Asia Pacific to find out what's happening here. So to begin with, we have some research from IWG, so they're a global workspace provider, which shows that more than 3 times the number of FTSE 250 companies are looking to use the hub and spoke style office model. 49% are considering moving to offices to areas where their workforce typically live, and only 13% expect their workforce to return to a 5-day office week. And now this last stat tallies with a campaign that the CIPD has launched, and the CIPD is a UK professional body for HR and people development, and they are calling on the government to make it a right for employees to request flexible working from day one. Now, on the next slide, we have a quote from Chris Jones, who's a transportation consultant, and he said, "The question remains whether people will commute on a daily basis or rather adopt an ad hoc model, where they only use public transport on certain days of the week or month. An unusually high number of people have left city centres in favour of suburban or rural living, further changing the way they would normally commute." And I just want to put this into perspective for you guys, because I've read that South Korea has the world's longest commute time. It averages nearly 2.5 hours both ways. And if my maths is correct, that's around 12 hours a week traveling to and from work, equivalent to 72 days in a working year. So when you compare the time lost to the time gained from working remotely, one can only assume that productivity would naturally increase. But that said, one must also consider things like training, career progression, and even creativity levels when looking at the work from anywhere culture. So let's move on to some introductions. My name is Eloise Hanson. I am the news editor at Boutique Hotel News, which is the sister site to Serviced Apartment News. Both of these multimedia platforms are published by International Hospitality Media, and we also have a third website in the portfolio called Short Term Rentals. So let's hear from our panelists today. And I'm going to move from left to right on my screen and allow these guys to introduce themselves. So this means I am beginning with Vivi. Lovely to have you here.
Well, thank you so much, Louise. I love the context that you put together. It all makes sense, and I'm already learning so much. And I'm so excited to be hearing from the real estate specialists and mobility specialists today. My name is Vivi Cahyadi Himmel. I'm the CEO and co-founder of AltoVita. At AltoVita, I lead the R&D, product design, and I also drive the technology adoption for AltoVita. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to hearing from all of you.
Thanks, Vivi. And I'm moving to David next, please.
Sure. Thanks for inviting me back. I'm David Abraham. I'm a co-founder of Outpost, where remote work is in our DNA. We run live workspaces in idyllic destinations where people want to be. And that, think of Bali, think of Siem Reap in Cambodia. And we've just been excited to be a part of the remote work revolution for 5 years now. Excuse me.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. And I'm coming to Ellen next.
Hi, thanks, Eloise. I'm Ellen Zisselsberger. I lead strategic resourcing and mobility at KPMG Asia Pacific. I specialize in talent acquisition, resourcing strategies and programs, transformation, and also global mobility. I'm also very lucky to be an expat myself. So I've worked for KPMG in 6 different countries. And I'm also very much looking forward to today's discussion. As you might be able to tell, I'm currently located in Hong Kong, and I am also able to work in an office environment at the moment, but have of course also experienced work from anywhere recently. So really looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks so much, Ellen. And Eva, I'm heading over to you next, please.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. This is Eva. Good morning, good afternoon. And to all of you, I know we have participants from all around the world in different time zones. My name is Eva. I am leading the Total Rewards regional team at Cargill. For those who may not know Cargill so well, Cargill is a global provider of food, agriculture, finance, and industrial products and services. So my day-to-day work is to provide compensation, global mobility solutions, and services to our business clients in the region. We operate in 14 countries in the Asia Pacific region with a very aggressive growth plan for the next 5 years. So I am really happy to be in this panel to share some ideas with the group and to also learn from all of you. I am now working from home. It doesn't mean that I cannot go to the office. I am located in Shanghai, but I have this flexibility to choose what makes sense, what is more efficient for me. So I am working from home today, attending this panel.
Thanks, Eva. And last but not least, Quirin.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Quirin. Originally, as you maybe can guess from my name, I'm from Germany, but I'm based in Sydney, Australia right now. I'm actually in our office. We sort of are less restrained here since a bit. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of MadeComfy. And for those of you who don't know MadeComfy, what we do is we enable property owners, property developers, or real estate agents to get the properties on the short-term rental market under the MadeComfy brand. And all our properties come with a specific standard and around quality and service. And for guests, that means to have that expectation, you know what's going to happen, and a specific service around that. All properties are insured to sort of provide that similar what we are used from hotel and service apartment brands when we travel. Thank you so much for being here. Blessed to be on this panel and happy to answer any kind of question around working from anywhere or short-term rentals in general.
Thank you, and thank you all, and all the LinkedIn profiles of our speakers today have been popped in the chat, so I encourage our audience to connect and carry on the conversation offline. So this means we are now ready to rumble, and I'm going to kick off with a question to Ellen, please. And I'd like to ask Ellen, how has your strategy changed as a result of the pandemic, and what are you now looking for when it comes to sourcing accommodation?
Very good question to start off with. I think agile and hybrid working, including work from anywhere, has existed within KPMG since before the pandemic. But I think not many of us really anticipated that we would see it becoming a reality for the majority of our workforce. I mean, pretty much overnight. And I think it's really forced us to think about our traditional ways of working, what we can do in terms of the future of work, in particularly with becoming more remote workers, a more mobile workforce. And also it's sort of really given us an opportunity to look at the benefits that we can garner and all the positives from having a flexible working model. If we now look at this from a corporate housing perspective, the moves sort of from quite significantly a work anywhere model has of course meant and encouraged us to really look at what we expect from our corporate housing and accommodation providers. Now, of course, the safety and security of our employees is always paramount, but the pandemic has, of course, really reinforced that. So some of the key things that we're looking for right now, of course, is hygiene, good sort of levels of cleanliness. We're also looking at really sort of the space set up in corporate housing as well. I mean, a lot of us know that well-being has, of course, become a key feature of the pandemic. So, for example, KPMG in the US itself last year did a survey, and workers in the US said that around sort of 36% of workers were experiencing more work-related stress as part of their working life. And again, we're sort of seeing it becomes very difficult for people who are working from home to really switch off, because suddenly your working and your home space has become intertwined, and it's very difficult to try and separate them. And so really what we're looking for is accommodation that can sort of support people to feel comfortable, so that your desk doesn't suddenly become the same area that you're sleeping in, for example. We're also looking for good ventilation, open spaces. If people are self-isolating or quarantining, maybe a balcony that they can step out onto, just so that they have a little bit more freedom of movement. And I think technology, of course, very important. So again, we're looking for fast, reliable internet connections to make sure that our workers can remain online, connected, service their clients, continue working on projects, and also that the support is there for when they need help. And then last but not least, sustainability, again, is very important for us, but it's become a lot more challenging, I think, in the pandemic, because of course, again, going back to the sort of hygiene requirements, everything being wrapped into plastic, the daily use of disposable surgical face masks. So again, we're kind of looking to our suppliers to make sure that they're considering sustainability even during these challenging times.
And so far, I guess we've talked about the physical space and what you are seeking from an accommodation, but I wonder just how important are things like dynamic rates when it comes to sourcing and booking your accommodation, and how does that feed into negotiations?
At KPMG, we tend to use a bit of a hybrid model. So obviously having negotiated rates, but also dynamic rates. I think right now what's really important for us is flexibility. So the flexibility to make last minute bookings, but also potentially cancellations. I mean, there are a lot of travel restrictions and requirements across the APAC region. So, you know, travel, it isn't how it used to be that you could just hop on a plane, arrive somewhere without any problems. You know, flights are being cancelled for operational reasons. So there's, you know, the situation is very fluid. There's lots of changes that happen. And we, of course, want our providers to understand that and to offer us that flexibility. Also, extensions, again, we might need to extend accommodation at short notice. So, and ideally would like to have that extension with as minimal disruption to the individual as possible.
Thanks, Ellen. And I'd like to come on over to David and ask, what are you seeing in terms of what the work from anywhere population is now seeking?
Sure. What we've seen over the past 5 years is and going in today is a change. Now we're based in Bali. Bali's not open, and so we're not physically seeing some of the changes happening because people aren't getting them. But what this was in 2016 when we were starting out, was a niche lifestyle. People who had the ability to code, people who were marketing, individual consultants could be on the road. I was living that lifestyle, and I was kind of shying away from telling people where I was. I just told them the times that I could meet and the times that we could call. And now all of a sudden things have gone mainstream. And so what we're noticing from future members, as we say, are people are part of companies. We've got a large increase in questions from startups around Southeast Asia. They're wondering when they can bring individuals in. We're seeing more teams interested in coming out. We believe that retreats will be used at a far greater degree because companies will have to find ways to create connections, and retreats will be one of those ways. But we've seen, I think overall, we've been quite impressed with the breadth of people who are interested in asking questions about our spaces and making future bookings. And we're seeing that now domestically. Historically, most of our properties are international focused. But now we're seeing a larger domestic interest, people coming from Jakarta or Surabaya. And then now we're also with Singapore discussions, there's more conversations there. So typically Asia hasn't been our market, but we've been pleasantly surprised about the conversations that we're having and the types of bookings we're seeing later in the year.
And with all this in mind, are you having to maybe rethink operations or maybe adapt your operations differently to suit the different demands and these changing needs?
Well, we're seeing a little bit of an upmarket switch. We've tended to look at our properties are 3, 4-star, depending on where you look. And so we're seeing more demand from a higher level of spend power. They may not be staying as long. I might be saying a week, 2 weeks, as opposed to 4 weeks, 8 weeks, or 12 weeks. But we are seeing that demand in terms of our services. I mean, we've been catering for this lifestyle for a while, so we feel that a lot of our services are the time has come. So we don't have to necessarily change. I think, what Ellen did was she did a great job of explaining some of the services that people need. But from what we focus on is we take that as a given. We're not going to compete on the speed of our internet. It's a given. We don't talk about our electricity or our hot water either, but it's there. And so what we really focus on are what are the social needs that these workers are going to face, because people aren't coming from work from home to work from hotel room. While it's great, many of these people want to get out and see the place, understand the culture that they're in. And so we're there to be able to provide the connections, both personal, professional, as well as cultural.
We held a poll on the previous Rising Up webinar, and one of the first polls, I believe, was about what is it that you are looking for when you come to source accommodation. And the first answer was on property services, and the other was the local area. And the local area, in terms of what's happening, those social aspects, the cafes, the restaurants, had a higher percentage of responses. That was by far the most favoured. And Quirin, I'm coming over to you next, please, because as I've just mentioned, we've been talking about on property services, and I understand that at MadeComfy you offer a property styling and furniture service, and I'm wondering, are you now rethinking how you kit out a property?
Yeah, maybe to sort of start here in Australia, most properties are generally unfurnished. So we look into the long-term market, then they're empty. So we had quite early think about how do we enable additional properties to participate in the short-term, mid-term, flexible renting space. And when you look at the sort of target that we had prior was all around 1 week plus in general. And when you stay somewhere for more than a few days, you do expect certain parts, like a separate living area, like a separate desk, a space where you don't sit on top of each other when you work and things like that. So we were maybe here generally prepared for that. But what really sort of changed a little bit is the demand on flexible living space. And that's simply driven by more uncertainty, by, again, knowing that you don't have to be in an office. And here in Australia, whilst we don't have certain restrictions, we definitely also have a lot of international companies where you simply don't go to the main office. Atlassian is fully remote until, I think, indefinite now. So there is an increase in demand, and on that comes the increase in demand to furnish properties, and especially us expanding in locations where short-term rental was maybe not there yet, and not maybe in this extent, is where we see a lot of increasing requirement to set properties up. And there's not just basic furnishing and making sure they have tables and beds in there, but making sure the cooking utensils, making sure that things, of course, internet is sort of a bit of a given, but anything you need to live in a space for an extended time and you're not missing out on is what has to be added.
So does that mean you are seeing a rise in demand for homes that are ready to move into?
Yes. So the short answer is yes. We after I can talk sort of what we sort of see after the sort of dip or cliff in April last year. It was a free fall cliff for everyone in accommodation, I think. It's been a back recovery, and we are now at a stronger demand than we had in pre-COVID, and we have like stronger sales and everything than pre-COVID. So that is sort of an indicator that that there is a stronger demand out there. On top of that comes, again, next to the whole working bit, is people renovating their places and need a place for a couple of months and things like that. And of course, people are also now looking at locations that are more regional, that were previously maybe out of range, and you would maybe go there for a weekend trip, but you wouldn't really consider yeah, living there for a month or two. So that's where the increase in demand is coming from, and it is on a national level that we see this here.
Thanks, Quirin. And Vivi, I'm wondering, how does this tally with what you're seeing at AltoVita, and has there been any other changes that you'd like to add in terms of demand and what you're, any differences and similarities there?
Yeah, I'm very much echoing with what everyone's saying already in the panel today. So we were holding this 3-month Innovation Summit event, and we kicked it off with a design thinking session, and we had about 400 people participating there. We took a poll. Staggering number of people who participated said that at least 93% prefer flexible rentals, so monthly, weekly rentals. And only 2% would prefer fixed-term rental. So what we're seeing is more and more millennials and Gen Z entering into the workforce. They want a ready-made solution. They want to move in with their suitcases and not struggle with Wi-Fi or utility companies the first day they move in. Eloise, we talked about this, and you mentioned you were currently in the process of moving as well. And the first thing you need to figure out is the Wi-Fi, because you're working from home. You need to be able to function, essentially. So that's what we're seeing. And we also ran another survey. A staggering number of 46% prefer fully furnished, and another 39% want utilities such as Wi-Fi and electricity already included. So that's very much echoing with what Quirin was mentioning. And actually what David was saying about how work from anywhere becoming mainstream also resonated with me personally. I was always working from home, and when I traveled for about 5 years between Tokyo, Jakarta, and London, I was always on my suitcase, and I was working from anywhere at the time already for 5 years. So it's nice to see how the rest of the world is adopting to this, and to be on this panel, to be able to hear the perspectives of HR, and also be able to hear the perspective of property managers and how they're actually seeing the demand and actually being able to meet the demand right now is really fascinating to me. So that's my perspective.
Thanks so much, Vivi. And Vivi, you just mentioned that we are hearing some HR perspectives, which brings me nicely onto Eva. And I'd like to ask Eva, what changes are you expecting in terms of the management of talent and growth mobility as a result of the work from anywhere trend?
Sure. So first of all, I think what Alan has shared, the practices and strategic changes are considering in KPMG are very much resonating with me. It could be because we are in a bit similar position as a corporate HR managing these programs. So the work from anywhere, I would say it's a quite aggressive term in my view. Similar to KPMG, Cargill, before the crisis and the pandemic, we also had our flexible working global guidelines where employees were allowed to make their own decisions. Certainly they needed to get the approvals from their business managers to work from home for a personal driven reason circumstances. So they were given this level of flexibility prior to the crisis. And now it looks to me, we are even thinking broader, boldly on what would be the future of the working population. So it could be even work from anywhere. But I would say from a corporate point of view, it would certainly create challenges, and it would require some actions on the side of corporate HR. COVID could be an accelerator on these corporate actions, but it's not just because of COVID. We were also in a lot of discussion.
seems like we've lost Eve.
What the employees, what they need, what the market, what the demand. Is my voice back?
It is back. We lost you for a second there, but you are back, Eva.
Yeah, sorry for the challenges. As you can see, that could happen as we work from home. So I would say the immediate actions that we are taking at Cargill is to have a group of HRs or other functional employees with the expertise. They work together to review our current programs, and we are in the process of determining some new principles by taking into account company's culture, strategy, focus areas, the needs of our managers and employees. And we need to ensure these principles, and it could be in the future, an even more formal policy could enable the continuity and the success of our business. So Cargill is unlike KPMG. I think that is a more professional organization. Most of employees could be able to work maybe remotely, virtually. But as I said, Cargill is an organization with a lot of manufacturing. Mm-hmm. So it means we need to also consider these internal complexities as we work out a global framework that could be applied globally.
So are you in agreement then that virtual assignments are going to play a role in the future? And if so, what impact is that going to have on corporate accommodation?
Virtual assignment, that's another very recent hot topic, I think, in this industry, in my organization. I would say I am having a mixed view on this. I think virtual assignments would certainly for the moment are increasing because of the COVID impact is still continuing in many places, and the situation is fluid, changing even every day. So we for now we are a bit using virtual assignments to fulfill any urgent business requirements where they may need an expert from another country, another place to support an essential business need, but due to the current travel restrictions, immigration challenges, we may not be able to bring the people, the experts physically in the location of where the work is residing or the role is located as our most preferred location. So we are using virtual assignments. But if we talk about the future, we may need to further assess whether this would become a trending, longer term trending, or we still need to put some limits on where and how we leverage virtual assignments. As I have to say, we received feedback from our leaders and managers. And we know it may not always work to use a full virtual arrangement to fulfill the critical business needs. So in my opinion, the physical assignments, virtual assignments would be taking place maybe at the same time, dependent on how we leverage these options to best fulfill the business needs. And if we then look at how this would impact on our corporate accommodation and options, I would say very, very similar to what our panelists have said. First and foremost, I think as a corporate HR person, we want it to be the solution, a corporate accommodation solution, to be flexible. And we really need some options to accommodate shorter term leases. And many of the panelists have said it's critical to make sure the conditions of the accommodation can fulfill and meet the home office needs. If we need to be home officing for some time due to quarantine or continued involvement of some unexpected situations. So we want in the future, the apartment can be a good living place, but also it could have some office set up to enable the best capacity of the expats, assignees working from a corporate accommodation. And we hope it could also be a quiet environment, as now it would be more and more a requirement to connect virtually. And again, good Wi-Fi stability would be a key enabler to ensure the virtual connection are working.
Thanks, Eva. Thanks so much.
Can I just add something on this? Simply because where we are in Australia, where we can freely travel on a virtual assignment, what we sort of see is like, I agree on that. It is all possible virtually, especially when you have certain experts that could do that. But what we see here and what I sort of believe is we are sort of herd animals, and there is an advantage of being in a room, maybe not just coming there for a day, but being somewhere and having a physical presence. It definitely came back here, and it will be maybe some time, but it will definitely come back. What is maybe changing a little bit is that you do a day trip just to be present. You can do this digitally, but this kind of longer stays to be physically somewhere. We've had one of our new starters from Melbourne being here in Sydney for 2 weeks, and it's so much more efficient just to be here, but you maybe do some of those shorter trips less. But that's maybe something what we can see here in Australia already, given that we are out of restrictions for several months now. Just to add on that for what Eva said.
Vivi?
Yeah, I wanted to also comment on this. I think it's really fascinating how the world will evolve in the next few months as we are becoming more and more vaccinated. Because we're always wondering how the policies will be for remote working. There's a very split view. Obviously, you've seen on the news, there's Salesforce, Twitter, Spotify, who have publicly announced they would allow their employees to work from anywhere, subject to a few fine prints, of course, like Eva and Ellen would jump in probably. We'll need to look at the labor employment law, tax compliance, immigration, so on and so forth, to allow employees to work from anywhere. And then on the other side, there is Apple, Google, and Amazon, who are increasing their investment into office spaces. Apple announced, a staggering number of 430 billion investment into these offices over the next few years in the US, for example. So that tells us that they're going to put their employees back in the office. But when we look at the practicality of it, even if employees want to work from home, let's say 2 or 3 days, and then employers want to send their employees back to the office at least for 3 days, the practicality is that employees, sometimes they do feel that if they work from home, they would miss out on the politics or the career development. So all of these soft traits of working from office is now being carefully considered by employees themselves, even if majority of them would prefer to work from home, and for obvious reason, productivity and so on and so forth. So it will be interesting to see how things really pan out over the next few months.
Thanks, Vivi. And I'd like to bring Ellen in on this conversation as well to offer a different perspective. What are your thoughts on virtual assignments and the impact on corporate accommodation? I'd like to feed in a question here that's come in from the audience about, with less physical trips, required to the office space and tech enablement having its limitations, could one of the big challenges for a large business be leading an agile workforce? So if you're able to, Ellen, to feed that into your answer and your thoughts, I'll be greatly appreciated.
Sure, absolutely. Just before I start, going back to what Vivi said around sort of working from home and companies looking at their office space, I agree. I really think that there's sort of a complementary approach here, that employees are really looking for that agility and empowerment to be able to choose how they work most effectively. And I think for a lot of them, it is going to be a balance of working from home and working from the office. So what I see happening in future is the purpose of the office is going to change. So I think where we've traditionally sort of had individual workstations and workspaces, I think it's going to become more collaborative, because people do right now, in this sort of permanent state of working from home, they do miss the interaction with their colleagues, the collaboration, the career development, the learning experiences that they can get from that. So I think we are going to see a complementary approach. Now, if we look at business travel, I think particularly here in the Asia Pacific region, with the multitude of restrictions that we have on travel and immigration, border closures, for example, I think we've obviously seen a big slash in travel budgets. To some extent, they've even gone to completely zero for the past 12 months. And I think it is still going to take some time for those travel budgets to increase again. I don't think they're not going to come back. I do think, you know, the appetite for business travel is certainly there. People want to reconnect with their colleagues, reconnect with their clients. And in a lot of cases, face-to-face interaction is easier and better. But I think, again, the nature of business travel is going to change a little bit, certainly in the short term. So I think in the past, where we might have had business travelers going on multiple destination trips, I think that is going to change, and we're going to see more sort of business critical travel going to a single destination. And again, that's sort of taking into account all of the testing requirements or quarantine requirements we have here in the Asia Pacific. Again, if you're going to embark on a business trip right now, you want to make sure it's absolutely worthwhile and necessary before you step on that plane. But as I said, hopefully with the vaccination, that is going to change. And again, travel budgets will increase, and we will go back to sort of similar levels of travel that we did have in the past.
Thank you. And I'd like to bring David in here. We've talked about physical meetings. You know, there's a pent-up demand for that in-person collaboration. I know Outpost has a strong focus on group travel and team retreats. So what are your forecasts for this kind of business travel, and where do you see demand coming from?
We see the retreat business already start to come back. We see that there are retreats that are run by companies, which based on Ellen's comments, would be a little hesitant. If it's, you have to be there, people aren't thinking, let's have a team retreat at the moment. So what we are seeing are private groups that are getting people together. You could say tour companies, and they're booking out our places in October, November, December. So there's a real optimism that people are going to work and travel. So we share that optimism, so that's the groups will come back. And the question is, how are these groups assembled? Is it one person and 5 of their friends saying, hey, let's have a work retreat? We saw that before the pandemic through a select group of people. I think we'll start to see that more with friends in New York saying, hey, let's head down to Oaxaca, Mexico and go somewhere, or people in Beijing saying, hey, let's as families go for a month and spend a month in Bali. Then there are tour companies that are coming in on the business. And then, like I said before, there'll be more company retreats, and not even just company retreats. We see more team retreats. I think the challenge that Ellen will have is how do you keep that culture when you're away? That feeling that, wow, I'm not at the office, so I'm away from the decision making is real. And that won't change no matter how many Zoom meetings you're going to have. There are benefits to work from home, and there are also disadvantages. And you got to be serious about what are you going to give up and what people are going to gain through this flexibility. My biggest concern, just as an individual and in my experience working remotely, is that it does get isolating. By having the choice of where you're going to work, it adds a wonderful thing, an opportunity in your life to be in amazing places. It also adds one little additional stress, being able to build your own routine. So these are things that we see that people are going to learn over time.
And Quirin, we've kind of talked about, I mean, David, you've just mentioned that, friends might get together or teams might get together and think, what, sod it, I'm going to go halfway across the world and we'll go on a working trip. And Quirin, in terms of destination, have you noticed a shift in popularity? So
what we've seen, depending on what kind of restrictions are in place, the immediate shift was Australians, for example, here can't leave the country. So there was a huge increase in popularity into regional Australia, into locations that maybe you wanted to go for at some point in your life, but you always went to the more exciting further away. So regional locations being totally booked out down here. What we also seen though, maybe more, is a sort of popularity shift in type of accommodation, especially around the more spacious properties, studios, or sort of when you look at sort of normal hotel rooms, it's maybe something that took a bit of a dip, and larger properties, larger apartments gained on popularity also because we again staying longer and going maybe together with the family. So that's maybe the major thing that we've seen.
And is there a greater demand for these types of accommodations and trips to be more flexible?
Yeah, I think that was the main part that was very early, and I think Ellen mentioned that we've all been somehow hit by some kind of new lockdown, new border closure, and we simply had to change our travel plans. And by not having flexibility, is really difficult to book. It's also very difficult to book in advance. So being able to book on shorter booking windows, being able to modify our booking is something very important. But of course, it comes with complexity on the other side too, where you simply have to be prepared to when you have a change of booking to accommodate that, when you have an extension to accommodate that. So being able to manage the logistical challenge behind that to still satisfy the property owners' requirements about that, not doing this they're doing this for a living, they're paying mortgages and things like that. So being able to still do that, run as a business and provide the flexibility is something that definitely put some stress on many, but it is a super requirement, and I can see that for quite a while as one of the top requirements, that flexibility to change last minute, to postpone or to book last minute, and being able to have a very smooth and transparent process behind that.
Thank you. And I'd like to expand on that slightly further and come back to David and ask, I've seen quite a few subscription models being introduced. And I'm curious, David, as to your thoughts in what role will membership/subscription play when it does come to sourcing, booking, maybe cancelling future accommodation?
I think subscriptions are a great opportunity if the brand or the company has the properties and they can sign up a number of people to be able to be in this property or that property. But the nature of some of the challenges you face, that the nature of property being what it is worth more in one location than another. So the idea of something becomes great, but the complexities become a little bit of a challenge. And where we look at it is we look at the loyalty end. And our focus is really on the individual. And what we find is that when people engage in this lifestyle, they, especially those who travel quite often, they start to lose a little bit of connections at home, which is difficult because they're on the road so much. The question is what can we do as a brand, and as a, what can people do to create those, facilitate those connections? And so we look at something more as a loyalty program than a membership program. And loyalty has an opportunity to create connections among people. And we feel that loyalty programs aren't doing that now. I'm a member of Bonvoy and United Miles, but I don't get on a plane and say, hey, is anyone here a gold status member? I'd really love to chat to you about your experience, or check into Marriott and say, hey, I'm working in marketing. Can I speak to you? People would think you're nuts. But what we try and offer is those types of experiences, so that when you're a loyalty person and you're traveling and you're on the road a lot, you have an opportunity to really connect with others who are in your field or at your level. And we increasingly think that's what the next generations are looking for, those types of real sustained connections, rather than more points.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to come to Eva next, please. Again, almost like as an expansion of what we've just been talking about, and ask Eva, are you finding that employees are having a greater say in how they book a corporate accommodation, but also where they stay?
I would say it would dependent on the company policy. The policy and budget established through the policy could vary significantly from company to company. At my organization, I think for the most of the time, if the employees are going through a corporate program with company sponsoring the costs, expenses on the corporate accommodation, then in these cases, they would maybe have a less say in how they could choose the corporate accommodation, as our current model is to work through a partner to manage the services, including corporate accommodation booking for them. But I would say now employees would still have the options as they prefer to stay, but these are options provided by our provider. So they have already done a filtering and shortlisted these which would meet the requirements of our organization. But as I also shared previously in this conversation, we are corporate level, we are working on a project to repurpose our flexible working program. So we try to come up with some common principles that can apply at company level. So in the new framework, we could offer more flexibility to have different tiered services in the new program for our employees. So it could be very likely the employees would have a big say in where they want to live, they want to book or accommodation, if it's not maybe sponsored fully by the organization. So in these situations, I think that would be a very potential trend in my organization. I speak from Cargill's perspective.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see technology supporting this process, and could it also present some challenges too?
I would say technology would be a important enabler as we continue to evolve on our program. So to leave it a way that employees can book if they in the future have more flexibility to choose where to stay, then we would believe the technology could make it easier, faster for our employees to experience that process. For example, I think as it's very, very common now in the market, the employees can access the information and place their orders via smartphone application. And it could be time saving, more efficient, and even less expensive compared to the traditional way that we may use a travel agent for our employees to assist them in the corporate accommodation. I would say in terms of the challengers, I think it's still a quite new trend, and we may need more experiences and the data points to validate and vet how the technology support would work for our employees, and also the validity of the information on these technologies may need to be ensuring it's accurate and can enable and ensure the conditions are safe and meet the requirements of an organization.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Eva. And we've had a question come in. I can see that we are running out of time, but I would like to finish up on this question so that to make sure that we've covered all grounds here. And I'd like to direct this question over to Quirin. And it is, how are short-term rental / vacation rental platforms progressing with providing duty of care policies strong enough to satisfy corporate travel buyers? Are some doing better than others?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't sort of wanna comment there on existing booking platforms, but what we've seen, there is a gap of the very big ones. When you look at the very big Airbnb, Booking.com, and so on, where we still see a lack of really managing those type of bookings. And but we do see the demand when we have businesses contacting us directly, for example. So it's something where there will be lots of work required, and I'm sure AltoVita is playing a big role in that. So I think the question is maybe easier for Vivi to answer, but definitely a gap in the market. And also those needs are going to, they're not fixed, they're going to shift a little bit over the next couple of years as well, as things, I would say, not go back, but evolve again going forward. So yeah, we will see, I think, still some developments here, but there's definitely a gap with the big players that is there to be filled.
And does this echo, I'm going to move over to the travel buyers on the panel. Do you agree? Does this echo with what you're seeing? Are there certain companies that are progressing very well with providing duty of care policies? I'm thinking of Ellen or Eva here to pick up.
I think as a corporate buyer, duty of care, of course, is very important for us, for our people, for our travelers and expats. I think there's certainly room for improvement at the moment, but we are, of course, seeing businesses sort of develop their models and come out with new concepts. But yes, I would say that there is still more to be done in this space as well.
Well, thank you.
I would also agree, and I think this is an important consideration in all the design and review of our programs, and it's also very much aligned with our values, which is one of it is putting people first and really care about the safety and well-being of employees.
Well, Thank you. And thank you to everyone for sharing your insights today. I'm always so surprised by how quickly time flies on these sessions. So I am going to wrap up quickly, but before I do, I would like to share the results of the poll, if we have these up on our screen. Here we go. So our first question, if your employer would allow work from anywhere, how long would you stay in a new place? Majority have voted for 3 months or more, closely followed by 1 to 2 months, closely followed by, well, somewhat followed by 1 week. So encouraging to see that people are spending greater time traveling and spent elsewhere. And the second poll, what type of housing would you like to stay in? And an overwhelming majority have voted for serviced apartment at 56%, followed by condo, multi-family house at, followed by villa at 19%, condo, multi-family house 16%, and then co-living and hotel coming up at the end there. So thank you to everyone that voted. So to wrap up very quickly, the next webinar in the Rising Up series will be on smart technology to smart distribution. I'm going to be handing back over to my colleague George Sell to host this one. And on your screens now, you can see who will be joining him in discussion, and the link to register has been posted in the chat. Our serviced apartment awards are back, and they're being held on the 24th of June. And I can remember so fondly our ceremony last year. It was one of the last industry events held within a matter of days before the first lockdown in the UK was announced. And now it'll likely to be one of the first events back. We've done a full circle here, and we hope that you can join us there. So tickets are on sale, and the link has also been posted in the chat. And that is it from us today. Thank you for everyone who tuned in. Thank you to Ellen, Vivi, Eva, Quirin, and David for your insights. And thank you to AltoVita for sponsoring. We are going to see you back here, same time tomorrow. So please take care and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.